This video is sponsored by Professional Photographers of America.
All right, what's going on, guys? Dan Watson. And just in case you happen to have a Sony camera, but have not gotten one of these 4 lenses right here, you absolutely should, because everyone should own a constant aperture zoom lens, which basically means that every time you zoom, the aperture doesn't change, and ideally with an f2.8 aperture, which means that you can bring in more light, shoot in darker environments, and get a little bit more subject background separation. But maybe you already have one of these and are thinking about upgrading to Sony's newest 24-70 Gm2. I really wanted to show you which of these lenses is actually the best, and if there is enough of a difference between any of these to make this upgrade worthy. But let me know, of all of these lenses right here, which is the one that you guys are currently using, or which do you think is best? Because I'm really curious, after I show you the results of these tests, which of these lenses you are still the most excited about. So there are 2 other lenses we should definitely talk about. One is the Rokinon 24-70, which I don't have right now, but I actually used it a couple weeks ago, and I was super impressed with it. So if you guys want to see more on that lens, definitely hit me up in the comments. But the other one is this. It is the Tamron 35-150 f2 to f2.8. It doesn't seem like a direct comparison with these, but I'll be honest, since getting this lens, I don't use a 24-70 all that often unless I absolutely need something smaller, like for travel or for the gimbal. So if you want to see why, go check out the full review of this lens because it's insane, plus the actual review of the Sony 24-70 f2.8 Gm2 is out. Go check that out, because not only did we review the lens, but we also did a freaking awesome shoot with a Lamborghini, so it's definitely worth it. And I appreciate you guys just hitting like, commenting if you guys want to. I always try to answer every single comment, so appreciate the support from you guys. Just hitting that like button makes a huge difference, and it means a lot. Now first, let's check out the Sony 24-70 f2.8 zooms, because for whatever reason, Sony is leaving the old 24-70 on the market. I can't really think of a good reason to buy it over the new 24-70. I mean, technically it's like $300 cheaper, but if you're already spending $2,000 on a lens, might as well spend the extra couple $100. It'll hold its value longer. It's massively lighter, like almost half a pound. And there's features on this lens which make it better, and it has some slightly improved image quality in a few areas. So we'll definitely compare it anyway to see if it's worth upgrading to the new one, but maybe you can find this on a decent sale. But for me, the big question is going to be on these 3 lenses. Now, the Tamron actually comes in the cheapest, and by far the cheapest. It's actually $900. And it feels a little bit cheaper. Literally, it has no hardware switches whatsoever, not even an AF manual focus switch, which is really a bummer, especially compared to just all of the options that we have on this one. But it's only 540 grams, so by far the lightest. 67mm front filter thread, whereas the others have 82, so definitely skinny as well. But keep in mind, this is a 28-75, while the others are 24-70. So a little bit different focal length, so you're gonna miss out on some of that wider lens, and that might be a deal breaker for some of you, especially if you don't already have like a 16-35. Now the Sigma 24-70 is really interesting. It actually looks really small, like almost the same size as the Tamron, but you pick this up and it is way heavier at 835 grams, so a massive difference here. Plus, the quality definitely feels like an upgrade. It does have things like an AF manual focus switch, it has an AF lock button, and also a zoom lock. So if you don't mind the difference in weight, the hardware upgrade, and only about $200 more expensive, seems really worth it. So now we get an almost $1,000 upgrade to the old Sony 24-70, which has basically the same hardware features as the Sigma. It doesn't really feel nicer, and actually the Sigma looks a little bit nicer. It comes in even heavier at 886 grams. It's larger. And by now you're probably understanding why this old Sony lens is not exactly at the top of my list of lenses to buy unless you're getting it used or on some crazy price. So last up we have the Sony 24-70, which is barely smaller than the Sigma, but massively lighter at just 695 grams. Still heavier than the Tamron though, but it does have some massive hardware upgrades. So you have an aperture ring now. It's also clickable or declickable if you want smooth changes. Has an iris lock in case you don't use that often, which I personally don't. It also has 2 custom buttons that you can program in the camera. Now, something I did like a lot is you actually have a zoom tension switch, which allows you to go to a smoother, lighter setup. So it's really easy to do these very quick throws on your zoom. So overall, this made for my favorite lens hardware of all 4 of these different lenses. So before we touch on image quality, if you have been hanging out with me for a while, you probably heard me talk about the nonprofit PPA and some of their awesome benefits. But one thing you probably haven't heard about yet is PPA's indemnification trust. And if you had to look that up, I did too, but what it is coverage designed specifically for photographers to help you with data loss recovery services and legal fees if you have an unhappy client. And that ranges from anything from advice on how to handle the matters to direct intervention or offsetting some of those costs or losses. And all that is in addition to $15,000 worth of equipment coverage, education, customizable contracts. All of that is included with your PPA membership. So check it out. I have a link below for a special discount on your membership when you sign up with PPA. So let's talk about the quality, and first up is going to be sharpness. And keep in mind, this is YouTube. There's tons of YouTube compression. It might be tough to see some of these differences that I'm talking about, but I'll include a link to be able to download the sample images in the description if you want to check them out yourself. They were shot on the 50 megapixel Sony A1. So we'll start things out talking about the wide end, because one thing that you'll notice with zoom lenses is that they aren't always the same quality at every focal length. So at 24 millimeters, which is actually 28 millimeters on the Tamron, it actually looks really good in the center, even wide open at f2.8. In fact, compare this to the Sigma 24-70 and it's almost identical. And the Sigma is a super sharp lens. So compared to the flagship Sony G Master though, the brand new one, it's again really tough to see the differences between these. However, head to those corners and that's where the Tamron just doesn't hold up compared to the Sigma, which has noticeably better quality. In fact, the Sigma is so good, it actually looks better than the first generation Sony in the corners, and only the newest Sony 24-70 beats it in sharpness. And even then, the difference is so slight that I'm only seeing it really at 200% on a 32-inch monitor. Now at 50 millimeters, pretty similar here. The Tamron is the weakest, just not by much. The Sigma sharpens things up just slightly, and the old 24-70 is not quite as good as the Sigma, and the new 24-70 has the win, just again, not by enough for me to buy this lens just for that. It's just a slight difference on it. Very similar thing at 70 millimeters. So the Tamron again is the weakest, but just by a little bit. The Sigma sharpens things up and is about on par with the Sony 24-70, the old one. However, again, the new 24-70 takes the win, but you're gonna have to look pretty close to see these differences. So for me, in the center, all of these lenses are just great. But if you care about corner to corner sharpness, so especially if you shoot, I don't know, something like product photography, you might wanna skip the Tamron in favor of either the Sigma or the newest Sony lens. Now for bokeh, I'm actually really impressed with the Tamron. It looks super clean, very round, and I'm not even talking about just for the price. It looks better than the Sigma, and even compared to both of the Sony lenses, I mean, I'm surprised, but to my eyes, the Tamron is my favorite of all of them. So let me know if you think I need to get my eyes checked, but to me, the 28-75 was my favorite, and maybe the new Sony 24-70 would be second on that one. Now I want to take a look at flare, but this is a little bit tougher to test because all of these lenses will react differently depending on the kind of light and how exactly it reflects on the lenses and your angle, and even how much flare you actually like. But for me, this new Sony 24-70 was my favorite by far. It was very soft, it had fewer artifacting. So if you're a fan of shooting into the sun, which I definitely am, I'd say the new Sony 24-70 G Master 2 is gonna be the best. Now autofocus is an interesting one because honestly, all of these lenses are fast enough for most people. If you happen to have a camera like the Sony A1, or maybe there's some other future high-speed Sony camera that shoots even faster, the new Sony 24-70 will support 30 frames per second shooting with full autofocus even while zooming, and technically these Sigma and Tamron will not. However, I still tested these with the Sony A1 with the continuous shooting speed set to high, with my son running towards me, and the Tamron held up extremely well. It was only like an occasional in-between shot that was just slightly out of focus, but if I slowed down my shooting rate, I got even more success with those, and it never outright missed or just like focused on the background or anything. So overall, the performance on this was great. Now the Sigma, very similar thing going on, although it might be slightly better. Again, it never missed, had no trouble keeping up, but maybe occasionally when I was high speed shooting, there would be an in-between frame that was just slightly back focused. The old 24-70 honestly seemed right on track with the Sigma. Almost perfect with the occasional shot coming out just slightly back focused. But again, all of these images are perfectly usable. And the newest Sony 24-70, probably the best performer here, expectedly, with basically 100% hit rate. For sure, every frame was locked on the eye, never really back focused at all, and you have the ability to shoot at the full 30 frames per second, which is nice. But honestly, unless you're shooting like F1 races, which there's one coming up, I highly doubt any of these lenses are going to be too slow for you. And none of these lenses had any autofocus issues. All of them were near silent, but there is a slight advantage to having the newest Sony 24-70 f2.8, especially if you're shooting on cameras like the A1 or just need the absolute fastest performance. So the question is, which of these lenses should you get? And what's interesting is that the Tamron 28-75, this used to be my favorite lens for sure. And now it's really bested by the Sigma, which is giving you back that 24mm on the wide end. It's got better hardware, better image quality, and the only hit on this lens is going to be the larger weight, and maybe I think it's like $200 more expensive. So if you're on a gimbal or something, a small gimbal, maybe that weight matters a bit more. But for most things, especially if you're a photographer, the Sigma is going to be worth the price difference. Now, I do think the old Sony 24-70 is going to be really difficult to justify. It's not really better quality than the Sigma. It's heavier, it's longer, it's not really even a hardware upgrade. And it's not the only Sony lens you can buy. So if you want to just stay Sony, you have another option now. So maybe if you already have this lens or you buy it used or something like that, it might be worth it. But for me, the new Sony 24-70 Gm2 is going to be worth getting instead of this lens if you do want to upgrade. It is basically the best of the best in just about every way. It's not quite as light as a Tamron, but has a ton of upgrades that are really worth it. The best quality overall. It also happens to be a Sony, so if you're a professional, you want a native lens, it might be crazy expensive, but this is going to be the one to get because it gives you the best of everything. So if you want to be a little bit more conservative on price, I would say the Sigma 24-70 is going to be the way to go. Or if you really want to save on weight, and that's critical, definitely go with a Tamron. However, let me know what you guys think of these 4 lenses. Definitely follow me on IG if you're not already, because I have tons of awesome BTS stuff going on over there. Just got some new lenses in that might shake things up a bit, so stay tuned. Hit me up in the comments, and until next time, which is actually going to be really, really soon, I promise.